Thank you so much, and thank you so much for organizing this amazing event. I love the t-shirt, I love the vibe, I love the content. And now I love being able to dive right into the topic of the Microsoft Dataverse, which from what I gather talking to people here, everybody's heard of and knows kind of, but also doesn't know all that much about it because they never took the time to look it up. Now's the time. Just sit back, maybe have some lunch, and let me give you a high-level overview of what it is and why it's really useful if you decide to dig into it. So this question will cover, will be the answer to the question, is it worth it to be well-versed in the Dataverse? And yes, pun very much intended. And to answer that question, I already, without knowing you, I already know one thing about you, which is you don't wake up in the morning pondering which database should I explore further? No, you wake up pondering how you can create the most value for your business. And in terms of data, that is usually the question, does my data allow me to reach decisions in a timely manner? This question can be further split up into the three related questions. Do I have access to all of my data, regardless of the tool it lives in? Am I deriving the best insights across of my aggregated data? And can I do so within a time frame to take action on while it's still relevant? To answer the question while it matters to my business, not 2 months later. And sorry, that was a slight mix-up. Sorry about that. And in terms of that first question, do I have a unified view into all of my data? You usually don't use one tool, do you? You use many tools, and they have their own database, they have their own data structure, and each tool is its own silo of data. And it's a cloud-based tool, and it's all the modern shindig of a SaaS product. So you might think, oh, we're totally up to date, we're totally more modern, we have all this amazing tools in our tool stack, but they are unable to communicate with each other. So in order to gain access into my data, I need to have all of my data in one place, regardless of which tool it resides in. Then, assuming you have a unified view into your data, can my different disciplines perform their magic on that unified data? So the data science team, the data engineers, AI, machine learning, all of these buzzwords. And lastly, how long does it actually take me to aggregate my data, get that insight into the unified data structure, and have my teams perform their data work to derive insights? That's the question we want to answer. In order to assess what we're dealing with at the moment, let's explore the current situation. And chances are this situation somewhat applies to your own experience. You're a regular company, you use many different applications. Let's say for the purpose of this demo, you use one CRM, one sales tool, and one tool to track customer loyalty. Each of these systems comes with its own data structure, its own database, and data is isolated from the other tools. Now, the entity client will be structured differently in each of these apps. So how will we be able to derive insights into that client, bridging together these different tools? That will be achieved by someone taking on the task and saying, okay, I need to bring these insights together. So that someone will create an integration between tool 1, tool 2, tool 3, trying to merge the data together. And that is a complex data integration project because you're using different data sources. They have different query languages. They have different keys across the data. The data will need to be ingested, transformed, mapped, kept up to date. And the end result is an integration layer shown at the bottom of the screen that requires constant maintenance and adds complexity to a build. It causes headaches to the architect, who is someone who has to deal with that complexity, but it also causes headaches to the security person. Because how can we ensure that the fee that this client is paying that's being tracked in the sales tool is not shared with members who are accessing data from the loyalty tool? And how can we ensure that the data that's been integrated is only shared with people who shall have access to that data? You can feel the headache building. So this can be made much easier with a shared data model. Each system's data would be synced with a unified data source, also shown at the bottom here. The specific users still use their individual apps. They don't need to, the sales team still uses the sales app, but all of the data gets pushed back to a single source of truth. And within that single source of truth, the data resides in the same structure. This is no longer a one-off integration build trying to wrangle it together effort. Now it's scalable and repeatable. So that it makes intuitive sense for us to say, yes, the solution, it's a unified storage. Thank you, we've solved the problem. What have we? Because a unified data lake comes with its own complexities. How do we normalize that data? How do we make it easily accessible? How do we keep it consistent? There's simply a graph of knowledge here that's hard to navigate. Because the raw data residing within that unified storage, it has to be curated. We need to define a set of metrics, of measures, of dimensions for our users to do their data work. And whoever is tasked with doing that curation turns into the bottleneck. So what's needed is a tool to allow for this efficient curation for many users without any one user having to become the bottleneck. And that is exactly what the CEOs of Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP came together when they founded the Open Data Initiative. It was brought to life to answer the question, how can we make it easier to derive value from data across all applications? And the Open Data Initiative is based on 3 core principles. The customer is who owns the data. That's the banner of it all. And because the customer owns their data, they need to be the ones having ownership and control over their data, regardless of the source application. It's not SAP who owns the data. It's not Microsoft. It's the client who pays SAP or Microsoft to store their data. Therefore, because that is the overarching theme, that data needs to be easily accessible and extensible in order to allow the client to get out their data and to break down data silos. Because only if they're able to retrieve their data efficiently will they be able to gain insights into their own data, including through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So these companies came together to create an idea of a mechanism on how to get the data out of each system and how to exchange it across systems. And that is, nope, not the Dataverse. It used to be called Common Data Model. And while I think the Dataverse is a much flashier and more fancy name, the Common Data Model is actually a perfect description of what it is. It is a data model found for common data. And it serves, no matter which name it goes by, it serves to execute exactly what the CEOs of these 3 companies had intended. a foundation to store commonly used data. Such a shared data model allows a business to organize its data from different sources, be it SAP, be it Microsoft, be it any of the other tools out there, and the different formats that data come in into a standardized structure. And now here's a glimpse of what that common data model schema would look like. And right out of the box, the Microsoft Dataverse comes with predefined tables and predefined columns. And these tables and columns store data that is commonly found across nearly all businesses. I don't care what your business does, but it will have clients, it will have vendors, it will have employees. Hopefully you will have sales to report, you will purchase things, you will do marketing. None of these functions are unique in any way. So these business functions, sales, services, finance, marketing, they're all installed right out of the gate in order to simplify exactly that creation, aggregation, and analysis of that data. And now you might say, no, actually, our use case really is much more specific. Well, they've got you covered there too, because Microsoft has invested very heavily in teaming up with industry leaders to create something called industry accelerators. For now, it exists for automotive, education, healthcare, government, media, and nonprofit, but that list keeps growing. And what that means, in addition to that horizontal covering, it also gives you that vertical depth. So for example, if you choose the industry accelerator for healthcare, it will come out of the box with a common data model schema for a patient and its health history, for example. So if you know where to want to write data to that table or build an app to say, we're running in the emergency room and now we have a new person walk through the door, we need to get their medical data, it will be right there for you to hit the ground running. That is the point of these industry accelerators. And that's the overall view, what the Dataverse comes equipped with, these predefined tables and columns. But now, of course, random tables with columns not related to each other would not be very helpful, would it? So, of course, it comes also with predefined relationships. And you can edit these relationships, definitely. You can add your own. You can delete existing relationships, but most of them, because they're so based on common data, you probably won't mind the fact that they're there. So for example, on the left, we see the accounts table, and account means any person, your business, any business entity your business is interacting with. That might be a vendor, it might be a client. And within any of these organizations, you have many contacts, right? You have 10 people working within a certain client. And for each of these tables, it comes with the predefined columns, and then you link them together. One question that usually comes up right about this point when talking about the Dataverse is, actually, I don't know if I have a license to the Dataverse. Where would I buy it if I wanted to? So how can I purchase the Dataverse product? Short answer is you can't, because it's not a standalone product. Instead, the Dataverse functionality is automatically added to Microsoft 365 licenses. So if you add a new license for a qualifying product, in my example, I chose the business standard license, it will automatically add the service plan for the common data service to your license. You can check whether you already, and chances are you already do have access to it within your Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So the key takeaway to bear in mind while we're proceeding our Dataverse journey is all the power provided by the Dataverse comes for free, built in, fully set up, ready to go out of the box. On with the show. I want to break down our further path into 4 steps, which is components that make up the Dataverse. Where do you store your data? Where do you define the logic behind your data? How do you secure your data? And how do you actually integrate the data? So we're going to start with the storage. And in terms of storing that data, that common data model we just explained and all of the predefined tables and columns, the physical data is stored within the Azure cloud. And that right there removes the burden of worrying about where does the data live, how does it scale, leave that to Azure. And then when you look at the tables that make up your Dataverse, you can click on any specific table. And this screenshot, I clicked on the accounts table. And then you will be taken to a view where you can see the schema, see the relationships, see the keys, see the content of the first 10 rows or something, and explore, get a better feel for that table. One thing that's important to know is you're not restricted to the predefined tables. You can add new tables, though it is strongly encouraged to edit existing tables. So let's say for some reason you need to track the shoe size of every contact you're interacting with. You simply add a new column to that context table. But if there's specific product information that's very unique to your business, feel free to add a new table and don't forget to set up the relationships. And in terms of relationships, out of the box, Dataverse supports one-to-many and its counterpart many-to-one, as well as many-to-many connections. The way this is set up is obviously you can choose which site to do it on, how to define the relationship. In our sample, we've gone to the accounts table and said one company has many contacts. So that's a one-to-many relationship. And this will be within the user interface. We will see the one-to-many end of the relationship is when we're in the accounts view of a specific account. We will see many of their contacts that are working within that client. Or on the counterpart, within a specific client, we will see the lookup to the related record for the account. And that is the many-to-one side of the relationship. But this is exciting. You can define custom relationships. So you don't have to. And if you don't, then you can simply decide for key events such as deletion, sharing, reparenting, assigning, deleting. You can choose which relationship, which behavior you want to have happen. And it's on a spectrum. So it ranges from the records are entirely independent. So actions taken on one side of the relationship will not affect the other at all, to the other end of the spectrum where you're saying any action taken on the record of the parent is automatically cascaded down to the child record. But you can further granularly define that relationship by saying, so for this type of behavior, for the reparenting, I want this type, for this type of event, I want this type of behavior, but for the other kind of event, I want another type of behavior. So go crazy. The world is your oyster. Whichever relationship behavior you want to have, you're free to set it up. In terms of business logic, where do we define the logic? And the Dataverse answered this question for itself by saying we are not defining it in the app layer. No, we're defining it in the data layer because that's where it shall live. It shall be, if our business rule is defined correctly, it shall be the same regardless of how our user interacts with that data. So chances are your organization, like any other organization out there, has some business logic. And that will impact how your team works with data. For example, your organization would have a rule, if an order comes in that is larger than $1,000, then a manager must approve that order. And within the Dataverse, you will build out this logic using business rules. As you can see on the screenshot, that's a visual drag and drop editor. And these business rules are now tied to your data. And they will be in effect regardless of how and where your users interact with this data. It might be Power Apps, it might be Power Automate, it might be via an API, doesn't matter. The rule is tied to the data, not the app. In terms of logic, another feature are the calculated columns. I was super excited when they were introduced because they use PowerFX, and PowerFX is very dear to my heart because it's very powerful. So, for example, a salesperson might want to automatically apply a discount. So if an order is larger than $1,000, then we give 10% discount. So it could be a simple math operation. It could be a conditional operation. But here's where it gets interesting. A calculated column can span two tables. It can span the current table and the parent table. At first, when they introduced it, that wasn't clear. So, and each demo they displayed focused on one table. It was like, well, it's kind of hard to get excited about a feature that will allow me to say column A plus column B. But now that you can actually traverse tables, that's when it gets interesting. And of course, the calculated column will be displayed just like all the other columns, so it will seamlessly integrate with your views in real time. And the third piece of the puzzle in terms of logic are roll-up columns. And they contain aggregated values, which are computed over all the rows that match a specific filtering related to a specific row. And these roll-up columns help users obtain insights into their data by monitoring key business metrics. Roll-ups also can traverse relationships. And that's what we're doing with this example here. We're saying within the table accounts, this is where we set the roll-up column. And then we say go to the related table called opportunities, filter out all of those opportunities that relate to this current account we're looking at, filter out all of those to only show the ones where the status is open, and then return the sum of all of the estimated revenues. That's how the roll-up behaves. Now, security. I think it's safe to say that Microsoft knows how to do security. So let's just lead with that, saying security has been defined. It is in place. It uses Azure Active Directory to ensure that only authorized users will access the environment, the data, and the reports. And the security in Dataverse can be implemented as a simple security model with broad access or down to granular details. Additionally, we can enable audit logs, which track data changes and date and time of access and which user accessed the data. And this is invaluable to the IT department, of course. So as a first building block, the environment. The environments are where your tables, your apps, and automations can be managed as a container. So for example, you can have a production, a test, and a development environment. Then you can assign a security group to an environment, and then only users who are members of the security group will be able to access the environment and its content. Crucially, environment are also fantastic for sharing among team members. So let's say one of your team members moves on to a different role, they can just share the environment with all of the apps and automations that access the data within the environment, and somebody else can very smoothly take over. This is the step where we say, as a first step within Azure, we define the authorized users. It helps to know that, of course, each user must have the proper licensing. And then when the user has been added, the next step is you define the security role. So either and add the user to that security role. And it comes, again, there's the word again, out of the box. It comes equipped with out-of-the-box security roles. So might as well just take those, or you can create your own. or you can edit existing security roles and make them your own. And Dataverse then uses role-based securities to group together a collection of privileges. And these security roles can be associated either directly to users, or they can be associated with teams and business units. And users can then be associated with that team or business unit. And this is how you do it if you don't want to grant that broad access. You would define the security roles in detail. And how you would do that, for example, what's highlighted in red here is the table for contacts. And then you can define, can the users create records, edit records, so just the CRUD access, and that you do that on a table basis, and then you do it on a record basis. So the access level is defined, can they only access their own records, or records owned by their business unit, or records owned by the organization. And what that refers to is the ownership of records, which is supported in two types, either organization owned or user and team owned. And organizational owned is very much broad access. You can't, it's an all or nothing access. So anyone who's within our organization can access this data or cannot access this data. Whereas when we're looking at user or team-owned data, we can get much more granular and saying, yes, you can view it, but you can't, or you can read it, but you can't write to it, you can't delete it, for example. And when in doubt, that's why this advice is, when in doubt, always choose user or team, because that's where you're able to more granularly define the access. And this is what it looks like, simply the user owned, when we say within the record, automatically the owner will be defined. You can make it visible or keep it invisible, but it will be there in the background. And if it's only user owned, then I will only see contacts that I myself have added or that have been assigned to me. And that's a different view of that user owned record. Additionally, in addition to doing this organization-wide, business unit-wide, table-wide, we can also go nitty-gritty down to the column level. I can activate for any table, whether it is a standard table, an edited table, a new table. This goes for any table. I can activate column security. And then nobody but the environment admin can see the column. So first, as a first step, the admin takes access away from everyone. And then we grant back access to a specific group of people. So for example, if we're dealing with HR, with data employees, then most certainly the salary column will be a secured column where the admin will take away access from everyone and then only give the HR lead, for example, access to the salaries of all of the employees. You will be able to, there's within the admin platform, there's one part where you can see these are all the columns for which column level security has been activated. And then you can also administer them the access from there to say which teams will be able to access which column information. And in terms of the auditing log, the Dataverse capability, the auditing capability is enabled within the Dataverse by default. And that means that all table and column data changes are recorded over time. And this is useful for analysis and reporting purposes, but of course also for IT. And we can enable or disable auditing at a different level. So we can enable or disable it at the organization level, the table level, or the column level. And the audited data changes are then stored in records of the audit table. And one big selling point for this is that it goes to great strength in trying to eliminate shadow IT. Because I'm sure you're all familiar with the term shadow IT, where it means that people are getting so frustrated with the backlog that is typical for each IT department, that they set up on their own. They bring in their own tools. They set up workflows that work for them. But the problem is that nobody has a centralized view into which data is shared. Where is that data? Is that data up to date? Does that data conform to our organization's business rules? And who actually is accessing this data? Again, we're back to a security person having a big headache because it's all out there. It's not governed. It's not secure. It's not scalable. And having this auditing feature by default within the Dataverse goes to great strength to actually do the automated reporting on which data is being accessed by which app, for example, who's accessing it, what's their role, when are they doing so, which data in particular are they looking at. So it gives the IT the knowledge of knowing our data is secure and we can always know and share what's out there. So the last piece of the puzzle is the integration. And the integration, we covered it first when we said, how do we ensure across different tools that the data comes within one unified data storage? And so I tend to call it external integration, where we're saying, how do we connect together external data sources into one data source? That part we've covered. But now the question is, okay, we got our data in here. How can we make sure that our team, all of the different disciplines within our team, can make the most use of that data? And that is the core principle on which the Dataverse was designed, to help aggregate all of an enterprise's data, no matter where that data is stored. And in many cases, we will need to get data into or out of an existing system to share it with the Dataverse. And this migration and or synchronization occurs easily using data flows, which we'll explore now. Data flows are a self-service data preparation technology. Data flows allows users to ingest, transform, and load data into the Dataverse, and to do so with data coming in from different sources. It does so by leveraging the power of Power Query. And Power Query, to those not familiar with it, is a no-code, low-code solution to visually transforming and combining data sources. Then, in the end, we map the resulting data to an existing standard table, or we create a new standard table and relate it back to a standard. We create a new table and relate it back to the standard. Both of these options are possible. And there are also custom connectors that you can build to integrate with legacy systems. And legacy systems are personally where I see tremendous power for the Dataverse, because as you all know, legacy systems are hard. In most cases, the people who built them up are no longer with the company, are enjoying their deserved retirement, have not created very in-depth documentations of what exactly the workflows are carrying out. So you know that the legacy system and the workflow is crucial for your business, but you don't really know what's happening within this black box. So making revisions to a black box, that's a really tall order. But with data flows, you can now retrieve data right out from under it and cycle it back in. In particular, what this will come in very handy is to use new technology, like, for example, AI. So pretend you have a legacy system that takes care of your business's product distribution. So it writes this, it's an Oracle application, it writes all the scripts that define where shall your truck routes be, where shall your trucks go to deliver the product. And now you're saying, oh, this is actually a perfect use case for applying AI, right? We can have AI map to that data and we can learn much better where we anticipate demand, do predictive analytics on it, and realize that actually 12 new toasters need to be sent to this one warehouse instead of the other. But this legacy app, it doesn't support AI. AI wasn't a thing when it came out. What we can do now is via data flow, we build a custom connector, we extract the data out from the legacy system. Within the Dataverse, we apply machine learning atop of that data. We come to that insight that actually weather reports, whatever, it's Oprah's finest things, whatever, make us predict that we will need to send toasters to a special warehouse. We gain that insight, and then we have it flow back, push it back to the legacy system. And that is a wonderful circle that's been able to achieve with our existing legacy system, because we now have the Dataverse to store that data and to do that data manipulation. And for certain sources, leading the way, of course, are Microsoft's own products like Excel, SQL, SharePoint. There are also out-of-the-box templates for doing this data transformation within Power Query. And this makes the process even easier, because what Power Query allows you to do in this case is to define a template. So what you can say is you can say, when I have a connector bring in data from Shopify, then there are 17 transformation steps we need to take. We need to change the key, we need to adjust the customer ID, we need to map the zip code, whatever it is. One person who knows how to do this does this once, saves it as a template, and everybody else who comes in and connects to that data flow, to that Shopify source, will then say, do you want to apply that template? Yes, please. It guides you through those 17 steps. You will always have the option to say, nope, actually step number 9, not applicable to this particular use case. Simply throw it out. It will remain in the template, but it will not be executed across the query you're running right then and there. But those data flows, they're useful for the migration and the synchronization, but we don't always have to move or synchronize the data. In some cases, having a virtual table is the best choice for leveraging the data directly from the source. Any business user can create a virtual connection to data that's external to the Dataverse. For now, there are virtual table providers limited to SQL, SharePoint, and Excel. Microsoft does say it plans to introduce more connectors. We'll see how that goes. But it's a really easy way of bringing in that data that resides outside the Dataverse virtually, in case there is a reason that's prompting you not to bring it right directly into the Dataverse with data flows. Okay, so what has been answered now is, does the Dataverse help us to bring in data from different tools? Does it allow us to aggregate our data in one place, regardless of which data its source is from? Yes, the answer is yes, it does. Now, the next question is, now that we have this data lake, this unified data storage, does the Dataverse help us in gaining valuable insights from this aggregated data? Let's see if it does. I tend to think of this as internal integration. So it's exchanging data within an organization, because any complex application that you will build or any complex question you will want to answer, you will have different kinds of people within your organization which will weigh in and which will bring their expertise to the table in figuring out this certain business question. And so you have the decision makers, you have business analysts, data scientists, data engineers. The list does go on, of course. This is just a snapshot. And how does the Dataverse help us in allowing these different roles to interact quickly with each other? Because we need to leverage their capabilities, their power, and to do so quickly. Again, before the business has moved on, we want to answer this question. Does the Dataverse help us in this regard? Turns out it does, because one thing we'll have to bear in mind is that each of these users has their favorite tools. Decision makers typically like to look at something in Excel, and that's that. Business analysts, their tool of choice might be Power BI. Data scientists might use the newest tool of the crop for machine learning and AI. Data engineers might be most comfortable with Databricks. And this is the tool they will want to use to answer a complex question. So how can they best collaborate? Now, they could all get together in a room, much like we are here at this conference, and put their heads together, block an hour in the calendar, and say, okay, this is what we have. The business analyst might take the lead, and he might talk the team through their Power BI file. So he will explain, this is where this data is coming from. This is what this visualization is representing. This is a filtering I'm using. This is the DAX I've written. Blah, 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 blah. And 1 hour later, the data engineer might say, okay, yeah, I get it. It makes sense. But how will I now use this expertise I've built up, these insights, with my particular machine learning tooling? Do I have to reinvent the wheel, take all of that debrief that the business analyst has just given me and build it up again? That does not seem like the smoothest way of doing this, right? And this is where the Dataverse can be particularly helpful, because it improves the interoperability across these different toolings. And in order to explain to you how that is achieved, we need to take a quick step back. Remember earlier when we talked about standard entities, standard tables, we said that the Dataverse offers standard tables with predefined columns and relationships. That's what we covered earlier. What I didn't mention earlier is that that also contains additional metadata. They're called traits in the Microsoft universe, and they also come out of the box predefined. Implemented by default, absolutely no action necessary on your part. And these traits are what allow for easy interoperability across applications. Because let's look at the standard table for accounts. So you can see we have the accounts table, and it has the following columns. It has account ID, name, credit limit, address city, and the address city has metadata associated with it. And this metadata is indicating that address 1 city is a geographical location. So knowing this programmatically through this traits mechanism will allow different applications to reason programmatically with this data. That's what they're all about. Because this metadata travels across tools. That's what ensures this interoperability. Because let's get back to our scenario of 3 people are meeting in a room. Now within this Power BI file that the business analyst is walking everyone through, aside from the data he's referring to, there's also the metadata that tells you that this is supposed to be a geolocation. You won't need human intelligence to spend an hour in a conference room to explain all this. It is encoded right there in the metadata. So neither of our 3 people in a room need to reinvent the understanding of the data and the relationships. That travels across the tools. So they can use it within their tool of choice. And this then brings the entire endeavor full circle, because let's say a business analyst starts out in Power BI. their data set flows right back into the Dataverse. Then the data engineer uses Databricks and points to that location in the Dataverse. This will now auto-generate the data frames for the data engineer. The scientists start working from where the data engineer and the business analyst left off to create more insights. These insights flow right back into the Dataverse. The business analyst back in Power BI connects to a table and takes advantages of those insights. The person tasked with building out the Power App can build the app atop of those insights. So this full circle is completed where the insights flow across the tools, and you can think of it as ever elevating higher. That's the power that gets unlocked. And now, of course, no presentation in this day and age would be complete if it wouldn't make some reference to Fabric, because now you can accelerate the time to insight even faster because Microsoft Dataverse automatically links to Microsoft Fabric. Microsoft Fabric, as we've heard before, today, before, many times before that, is the new end-to-end analytics platform. It is poised to address every aspect of an organization's analytical needs in one tool. And to do this, Fabric is based on the concept of one copy of data. This key capability is called shortcuts in OneLake, and it allows for easy sharing of data between users and applications without having to move or duplicate information unnecessarily. Fabric is powered by AI. The Azure OpenAI service is incorporated at every layer, so developers can leverage the power of generative AI against their data, and business users can then find insights in their data, all within AI and all within the unified storage that is offered. And this really brings it to full cycle in the virtuous cycle. If you remember correctly, we started out and still have with 3 questions. Can I gain insight into my data across all of the different tools I have, across all of the different databases where my data is stored? And we said yes, because you can connect all of these data sources directly to the Dataverse with data flow. So all of your data will be stored within the Dataverse. Then you will be able to define your business logic on the data level, not on the app level. And we said, okay, I've got it all in this unified storage, but how can my team make the most use of it? And we said it can because it travels, the metadata travels across tools. Every team member can keep using their favorite tooling to answer their piece of the puzzle, their part of the question. And all of their insights will flow back into that unified storage, creating that virtuous loop. But of course, the virtuous loop is only so if this process doesn't take a whole lot of time. If 6 months after I ask the question, somebody comes back and says, we have an answer, that might be a wonderful answer. It's most definitely too late because the business has moved on by now. But because this is all built into this one tool, it will be a very prompt way to come up with this answer. And then this is the really exciting part about it. The insights that have been generated, this answer that comes up, does not have to be handed off to someone, say, okay, now do with that whatever. No, we can say, okay, now we use this insight that's right within the Dataverse to build our applications, to point our Power Apps, our Power Automate, whichever other tooling we're using, to execute those insights we have gained. And this is where it becomes really, I see so much potential for this virtuous cycle because it no longer disengages the insight finding from the action taking. We've got this insight, it's right there in our unified storage. It follows our security guidelines. It's there for the taking. And now we can say, okay, let's build our workflows, let's build our apps on top of this valuable data mine that we have created and keep learning and growing from it. So we started out with the question, is it worth it to be well-versed in the Dataverse? Naturally, that's for each and every one of you to decide, but I hope I was able to convey to you that I think it very much is, and I can see it only ever getting stronger and even more powerful. Thank you so much for listening, and please do let me know if you have any questions.